River dawn. Nets whisper against wooden poles. Gulls call across a low sun. And someone, an elder woman, says quietly, "We let the river speak to the jar." The words hang with the steam from the catch. Quiet stones, loud stories.
Hello, I'm Samnong Bradley. Today, we walk the salt-scented paths of Prahok, Cambodia's fermented fish paste. From a market at dawn to a temple kitchen's offering bowl, I'll bring you close to the hands and jars that steward this flavor. Expect river sounds, the soft thud of paddles, and voices that measure time by moon in humidity.
And I'm Sovan Linda. The layers matter. Prahok carries history, regional identity, and household knowledge. In this episode, we'll explain what Prahok means culturally and why we'll keep technique descriptions high level. No step-by-step fermentation guidance on air. Full context and vetted resources are in the show notes.
Before we go further, a quick note on listening. When you hear specific place names, we've checked with families and cooperatives. We won't give exact household addresses or schedules. If you'd like to visit a producer, check our show notes for vetted cooperatives and liaison contacts who make visits respectful and beneficial.
Context Corner. Prahok is not just an ingredient. It's a pantry, a currency of hospitality, and sometimes an offering. Different regions have different textures and salt levels. It appears as a condiment at table, a flavor base in stews, and a remembered taste that can tell you where someone's family came from.
Picture a market at 5 a.m. I'm there with a small recorder, but mostly I'm listening. Fishmonger voices rise and fall as flaked silver fish are sorted by size. The smell is briny and bright, like river skin and sun-heated wood. He lifts a basket of small fish and says in Khmer, "These are for Prahok. They are for our jars." He laughs when I try to name the species. That laugh tells you everything about hands that know a river.
What this reveals is a rhythm: harvesting, salting, tending, and sharing. Many households begin the process with the catch of morning. Gendered divisions vary. Sometimes women steward jars, sometimes men pound the fish. What matters is the intergenerational handoff. The deeper story is how families measure time, not always by clocks, but by seasons, tides, and humidity.
I spent an afternoon in a yard with Grandma Neri. She sat on a low wooden stool, clothes aproned, a wide clay jar between her knees. She tapped the rim and said something that made her granddaughter laugh. "You hear? The jar tells me when it is ready." She times things by the moon and by how the air feels. She wouldn't give me a full recipe, just small rules of thumb passed down from her mother. She said, smiling, "When you know the jar, you know the meal you're making for your family."
The layers matter. Oral markers, phrases like "the jar speaks," are part of knowledge transfer. Anthropologists describe this as embodied knowing, sensory, relational, and contextual. That's why we avoid procedural instructions here. What we can do is honor the knowledge and explain how communities keep that practice safe.
At a small cooperative we visited near the river's bend, women in matching scarves worked under a corrugated roof. They handled jars like heirlooms. One cooperative leader, Pise, told me they're under market pressure. Buyers want neat packaging, consistent shelf life, and labels in Khmer and English. She's balancing tradition with a lot of paperwork and a new demand for traceability. She laughed and said, "Packaging is modern, but the jar still knows its own story."
Let's unpack that. Traditional makers face commercial pressures and food safety expectations. Formal markets ask for clearer labeling and sometimes refrigeration or testing, systems that were not part of household practice. That's where community liaisons and cooperatives can help, paying makers fairly, supporting lab testing where appropriate, and protecting proprietary household methods from being extracted without consent.
I also spent an afternoon with a young entrepreneur, Chenari, who's experimenting with small jars and illustrated labels, bright lotus petals, a smiling grandmother in line art, a little map that says, "Made with care in Kampong Cham." She told me she wants to bring Prahok to urban kitchens and to diaspora markets, but she doesn't want to erase the family names behind each recipe. She paused, then said softly, "We must tell their stories and pay them." That felt like hope, packaging as a way to connect, not to take.
The evidence shows us that responsible commercialization can help cultural continuity if it centers producers' rights, transparent payment, and community control. That means cooperative governance, shared profits, and a commitment to cultural attribution. These are tangible steps listeners can support when they buy or recommend products.
One of my favorite moments was a quiet temple kitchen. A monk moved with gentle, careful gestures as he ladled a small portion of prahok into a vegetable stew offered for midday chanting. The clink of the ladle on the bowl, the murmur of monks, and the scent. There's an intimacy there. Food is devotion, and prahok appears in both everyday meals and offerings. It holds memory and gives it back to the community.
That's where cultural meaning lives. From a cultural standpoint, Prahok links agrarian cycles, ritual life, and urban markets. It's a connector between river and table, between grandmother and grandchild, between a temple offering and a family supper. Listen to the stories and you hear migration, adaptation, and care.
Now, a quick sound moment. Imagine river splashes, baskets shaken, the gentle thud of a wooden paddle in a clay jar, market bargaining in the distance, then a bowl being set before a monk. These are the acoustic fingerprints of Prahok's making and sharing. Close your eyes and let that place settle in your ears.
A pause for the soundscape.
When we invited a food historian to comment, they reminded us that fermented fish pastes are regionally varied across Southeast Asia, each practice adapted to local ecologies and social structures. They emphasized, don't treat prahok as a recipe you can transplant without attention to context. That is, flavor is place, and technique is embedded in relationships.
We also spoke with a public health practitioner who works with rural cooperatives. She asked us to be clear. Fermentation is a controlled biological process in skilled hands. On this episode, we will not give step-by-step methods. If listeners are curious about safe food preservation in a general sense, we point to accredited food safety centers and university extension services listed in the show notes.
This matters practically. If you visit a maker, ask permission before photographing or recording, offer payment for time. Don't pressure for secret recipes, and ask whether it's appropriate to share their location publicly. If you want to support from afar, buy through vetted cooperatives, donate to community preservation funds, or request that online sales include a fair trade premium back to producers.
A few quick tips for respectful visits. Arrive with a translator or liaison if available. Bring a modest gift or payment. Keep recordings and interviews consensual, and be mindful of daily rhythms. Mornings or work times, afternoons can be rest. And please, do not replicate household fermentation at home based only on what you heard on a podcast.
The research tells us that listening is an ethical act. When you share a photo or a purchase, think about whether it helps the maker and does not extract their labor or knowledge. The deeper story is, taste is memory, and memory needs guardians.
Back in the yard, Grandma Neri wrapped a small cup of prahok for me to taste. She tapped the cup and said, teasing, "If you ruin your tongue, you ruin your memory." I tasted a concentrated umami blossom, sharp, briny, and deeply savory, and I thought of kitchens and long tables, and hands that measure care rather than grams.
That's the takeaway. Prahok is more than flavor. It is a vessel of intergenerational knowledge, a livelihood, a ritual element, and a subject of stewardship in a changing market. When we connect across those elements, ethics, commerce, and memory, we help ensure these practices continue on the community's terms.
We have full show notes with vetted contacts, baker and market-style companions, and food safety resource links. If you want to support makers ethically, you'll find suggestions and cooperative listings there. And for the lovers of sound, there are longer ambient clips from the river and the temple in the episode extras.
One last practical note. We paid for time with every person you heard today and secured permissions for the interviews used. If you're producing your own fieldwork, model that practice. Time is labor, and consent is part of dignity.
Thank you for walking with me through courtyards, jars, and temple kitchens. Taste is memory. Memory is community. Community asks us to be careful listeners. If you enjoyed this journey with Prahok, please subscribe to Ancient Echoes KH. Your subscription helps us reach more makers and tell more of these quiet, vital stories.
Credits: field recordings and interviews, our cooperative partners, the families who shared jars and stories, and the temple community for allowing us to listen. Music and ambient beds were cleared with performers or anonymized on request. Quiet stones, loud stories.
Find transcripts, show notes, and links to the cooperatives on our website. If you value this kind of cultural listening, consider sharing the episode with someone who loves food stories. It helps keep these voices heard.
I'm Sam Nong Bradley. Walk the temples with me next time as we continue to listen, learn, and belong to Cambodia's many stories. Safe journeys, rich stories, and until next time, smiles from the Mekong.